Let's see if it works.
Morning, Rabosai, and Shavua Tov. We're going to review a little bit of what we did on Yom Chamishi in order to continue here on Daf Hey Omid Aleph. And again, as I said, our goal is to get back to the main sugyas. Now, we're talking about Kilayim B'tzitzis, and how do we derive the principle that for the sake of tzitzis, we override the Iser Kilayim. And the Gemara mentioned the Shita of Rava. Rava derived from an extra word in Parsha Shlach that we read yesterday. It says tzitzis hakanaf. And the word hakanaf is interpreted by Rava to mean mimin hakanaf, which means that we're expanding the possibilities of the minim for tzitzis. What kind of begadim, made of what materials, will generate a chiyuv tzitzis? And Rava said the following, that really, in truth, any beged of any material generates a chiyuv tzitzis. There is a difference, and that we derive from kanaf mina kanaf, and that is that kanaf mina kanaf means that if, let's say, we gave the example of meshi, if you have a beged of meshi, then the tzitzis would have to be made of meshi. And that's called kanaf mina kanaf. Why does the Torah then specify, single out, semer upishtin? And the Torah says, lo silbash shatnes semer upishtin yachta. So Rava says that what's unique about those two minim is that it's bein b'minam, bein shalom b'minam, which means I could have a beged of pishtan and I could add tcheles of tsemer, or the other way around, I don't have to have kanaf mina kanaf. So that's called, in the lashon of Rava, minon potrim es minam velo es she'eno minam. And the exception is semru pishtan potrim bein b'minam bein shelo b'minam. Now, based on this drasha of Rava, of hakanaf min hakanaf, we say that the Torah didn't tell you that you absolutely must place semer, tzavua b'tchelis, meaning tchelis of tzemer, unless the beged, let's say the beged, for example, is made of tzemer. If the beged is made of pishtan, then he could create tzitzis out of pishtan. He doesn't have the halach of kanaf min kanaf, but he certainly has that as an option. And if that be the case, what is the Torah telling me by adding semeru pishtan? If, let's say, for example, you have a beged of pishtan, you have two options. You could either put on tzitzis of pishtan or tzitzis of tzemer. I'm talking about the tchelis. You might have argued that, well, you know what? The Torah is going to encourage you to use tzitzis of pishtan on a beged shel pishtan and circumvent any violation of kilayim. Says Rava, no. From the fact that the Torah upgraded the status of tzemeru pishtan to tell me that tzemeru pishtan works bein b'minam bein shalom b'minam, the Torah is therefore ipso facto telling me that tzitzis overrides kilayim, meaning that in these two cases of material, a beged that's made of either wool or linen, the Torah is saying that it goes beyond other materials where you require min hakanaf, and you don't require min hakanaf. So therefore it means that I can put tcheles of tzemer onto a beged of pishtan. Hence, I see that the Torah overrides the Yisur Kalayim for the sake of the mitzvah of tzitzis. So all that is fine and well according to Rava. And the maskana on the Gemara here on Daf Dalet Amud Beis is that Enoch Hinami according to Rava, from the addition of Tzemer Upishtan and the special status that the Torah upgrades Tzemer Upishtan to that status, we can derive the conclusion that since we have Smuchin and immediately after Lo Silba Shatnis, the Torah says Gedilim Tasalacha, Tzemer Upishtan, it means that the Torah overrides Kilayim in the case of tzitzis. So that's what we have for Rava. Now what we want to focus our attention on is Tana Debei Rabbi Shmuel. Now, on Daf Dalet Amud Beis again, just to reiterate what we did last week, we had quoted a Tana Debei Rabbi Shmuel. And according to that brisa, since the Torah says Tzemer Upishtan, that makes it mufnes. It means that if not for the fact that Tzemer Upishtan was mufnes, which means according to Bei Rabbi Shmuel, Tana de Bei Rabbi Shmuel, there's no need for Tzemer Upishtan. Halav Hachi, the Gemara says, if not for this mufnes status, which is derived from the extra words Tzemer Upishtan, then we would have assumed that tzitzis in the case of Kilayim is also. And then the question becomes, when the Torah says in Parsha Shlach, V'osulem tzitzis al kanfei v'gdeihem, and according to Rabbi Shmuel, B'godim stam is Tzemer Upishtan. So therefore, Tzemer Upishtan, the Yom Rachmana, Ovidle Tcheles, Utcheles Amrahu. The Gemara says that we're going to derive from a pasuk that we'll see in just a second that Tcheles is Amra, meaning it's Semer. And therefore, when we have a chut of Tcheles, and it's made of Semer, and we're going to add it to a beged of Pishtan, because the Torah went out of its way to mention Pishtan as well as an option, then we can derive Smuchin and come up with a heter for Tzitzis B'Kalayim. The Gemara says, and this is sort of parenthetical, but let's just put it on the table, that how do we know that Tcheles is Amra, is Semer, and that we derive from the parsha of Big Day Kahuna. In Big Day Kahuna, the Torah gives something called Sheish, which means that there are 6 different materials that have to be woven together, different chutim, in order to create the Big Day Kahuna. And first on that list in Shmos Perek Ches is Tcheles. And from the fact that the Tcheles is mentioned first on the list, right, we derive the conclusion that Amrahu, the min that is mentioned here, which is one of Sheish, one of 6, is Amra, is Semer, because again, we know that the other 6 are made of Pishtan. So this one, which is Tcheles, must be made of Semer. Okay, well, that's on the side. The main point is that we have, according to Tana Debei Rabbi Shmuel, a mufnes situation, which means that we have Tzemer Upishtan, which is superfluous, redundant. We know that it's Stam Beged, is Tzemer Upishtan. Why did the Torah have to specify Tzemer Upishtan? And the answer is for Smuchin, to tell me that since it's mufnes, we derive Smuchin. Hence, we derive the conclusion that tzitzis overrides Kilayim. So the Gemara now thinks at this point that Tana Debei Rabbi Shmuel accepts the sheet of Rava, and that Tzemer Upishtan is upgraded to a special status, in which even if it's not mimina kanaf, as Rava said before, nevertheless the tzitzis are sheros. And that means that I put tzitzis of tzemer onto a beged of pishta. So the Gemara says, but I have a problem. V'atana debei Rabbi Yishmael leslei de Rava. This is 5 lines up before the end of Daf Daled Amud Beis. Tana debei Rabbi Yishmael rejected Rava and never accepted the drasha of kanaf mina kanaf. In other words, Rava was the one who established, based on the pasuk tzitzis hakanaf, that in the case of other minim, other than tzemer upishtan, there's an obligation to put on tzitzis. In fact, it all depends on kanaf mina kanaf. Rabbi Yishmael never accepted that because Rabbi Yishmael derives from the parsha of Nigei Batim, of Nigei Begadim, that stam beged, that when the Torah says a beged, it refers to tzemer upishtan. And since the Torah says al kanfei vigdechem, that the mitzvah of tzitzis is on a beged, it must be tzemer upishtan. There are no additional materials like meshi, as we mentioned before, which would generate a mitzvah of tzitzis. So this entire sophisticated structure that we created, in which tzemer upishtan was mufnes, based on the brisa of Rabbi Yishmael, and the status of tzemer upishtan is being upgraded such that it patas even shalom b'minam, which would mean ipso facto that tzitzis, in the case of tzemer, overrides kilayim when the beged is made of pishtan. All that has to be put on hold because Rabbi Yishmael doesn't agree. He never accepted Rava's premise that kanaf mina kanaf teaches me that other minim, other than tzemer upishtan achayiv and tzitzis, Rabbi Yishmael doesn't have that on his radar screen because he understands that bigdayim beged means tzemer upishtan. And therefore, if we're going to justify the smuchin of tzitzis to kilayim and the drasha of that smuchin that tzitzis overrides kilayim based on Rabbi Yishmael, we have a problem because we would still assume that tzemer upishtan is necessary because those are the only materials that generate a mitzvah of tzitzis. And you don't have the license, the luxury of introducing Rava to set up that special status of tzemer upishtan that patas even shalom b'minan, as opposed in contrast to other meaning like meshi, because Rabbi Yishmael never accepted that. So we're going to read the Gemara now, Itzrich. Itzrich is here on the bottom of Daf Daled Amud Beis, and we're counting up from the bottom 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines up for the bottom. The Torah is going to teach me the heter of kilayim b'tzitzis. Salke daitach amina, I would have thought ki diyuka de rava kanaf min kanaf. V'hachi kamar Rahman. In the Havamina, I would have assumed like Rava, and therefore, Avidle tzemer litzemer, pishtim pishna. That if you have a beged, the kanaf is made of tzemer, then the chutim should be made of, chutei tzitzis should be made of tzemer likewise. If the beged is made of linen, then the chutei tzitzis should be made of linen. V'chi avdis tzemer litzemer is tzave, then you can certainly color the tzemer into tcheles, use tcheles and color it, dye it. Aval tzemer lepishtin, or pishtin l'tzemer, lo. So now I need tzemer pishtan to set up these two categories, these two materials on a superior level, to upgrade them to the state that Kosav Rachman and tzemer pishtan afilu tzemer lit pishtin. Pishtin lit tzemer meaning that here you don't require, as Rava requires, kanaf min kanaf, and you could create a beged of kilayim, and yet the Torah says that's okay, that's mutter. Why? For the sake of the mitzvah of tzitzis. And the Torah is now teaching us that the chutim, in the cases of tzarub pishtan, don't have to be mimina kanaf. And if that be the case, you can have tcheles of semer on a beged shel pishtan. That's going to teach us that the Torah was matir kilayim in the case of tzitzis. And therefore, we could derive from kilayim b'tzitzis the general universal rule of esei docha losas. Now we're on the top of Daf Hey. Tenach l'tana debei Rabbi Shmuel. We definitely have mufna in the parsha of tzitzis when the Torah specifies semru pishtan, because we know that in general, a beged, wherever it's stama in the Torah, it means semru pishtan. And therefore, from the fact that semru pishtan is redundant, it must be coming to tell me that the essay of tzitzis overrides the lotas of kilayim. That makes sense. And this drush of smuchin, based on mufnes, in the framework of Rabbi Shmuel, will be the basis for the universal principle of essay docha losas. However, the Rabbana reject Rabbi Shmuel. They don't hold that a beged stam is dafka at semeru pishtan. How do we know, therefore, the Torah is being matir kalayim b'tzitzis? Because semeru pishtan in this parsha is teaching me that the Torah prohibits wearing a beged that has both semeru pishtan. So we don't have mufnes. Minolahu, according to the Shitas Chachamim, we cannot darshan smuchin, and therefore we don't have a basis for essay dochalosasa. So the Gemara now is going to embark upon a study of Teglachas Mitzorah, Teglachas of Nazir, in order to prove that essay dochalosa, because in the case of Nazir, there's a mitzvah of Giluach that'll override the Iser of Pa'asa Rosh. And in the case of Nazir, likewise, there's a mitzvah at the end of his Nazirus to shave off the hair from his head and override the Iser of Pa'as Rosh. Nafkalu, according to the Chachamim, we're going to derive Esei Dochalosa Semi Rosh in the mitzvah of Tiglachas of the Mitzorah. After he purifies himself from tzaras, Sanya, we learned a brisa, and the brisa is interpreting a pasuk in Vayikra Yudalin in the parasha of Mitzorah. It says there, I'll read the whole pasuk. V'hoya bayom hashvi'i yigalach es kol sa'aro es rosho v'es kano v'es gabos einov v'es kol sa'aro yigalech. Now, why does the Torah specify rosho when it says yigalech es kol sa'aro? What is the extra word rosho teaching me? The Torah says that a Jew is not allowed to cut off the pales of his rosh, of his head. I'm going to apply that even to the case of a mitzorah who has a command, a mitzvah galechas kol sarosov, and he's not allowed to be megalech sa'aras rosho, if not for the extra pasuk. Why? Because he will violate lo sakifu pasra sheichem. In a minute, the Gemara is going to vacillate about whether he actually would violate the Isur. But right now, the Gemara is assuming, like Rabbi Akiva, that he would violate the Isur of Hakofa. He's therefore Tamaloma Rosho. The Torah is telling me with the word Rosho that despite the fact that the Mitzorah overrides the Isur of lo sakifu pasra sheichem, nevertheless, he's chayav to do so as part of the mitzvah of a Mitzorah in the process of his tara, and essay dochalosase. The essay of Yigalech es kol sioro es rosho is going to override the losas of losakifu pias rashechem. Hence, we have a source for Esei Docha Los Aser. That's why the Torah in Achos Isha and Yibum had to tell me Oleh to undermine the principle of Esei Docha Los Aser. Now, let's talk for a moment about the lav of Lo Sakifu Pias Rashecha. When does it apply? The Gemara says, Kasavar Aitana, the Tana of this brisa, is of the opinion that Hakofa is called Rosho Shma Hakofa. Meaning, there's a paradox here because we would have thought that if he cuts off all the hair on his head, he doesn't violate this Issa. Why? Because if he takes a baldy, here they call it Tiglachas Efes, if you know what I mean, then he doesn't violate Pa'as Roshechem. Pa'as Roshechem means when you cut the sides and you leave the rest of your head with hair on it. But we're going now, according to the Mandi Omar, and we'll see in a minute who that Mandi Omar is, that holds that Pa'as Roshechem includes an Isur that applies even if he cuts off every last hair on his head, because Hakofas Kol Rosho Shma Hakofa, it's included in the lav, and therefore we have to override the lav for the sake of the mitzvah of Yigalech es Kol Sioro es Rosho, etc. in the case of a mitzvah. However, the Gemara says that there's another Mandi Omar who holds that the Torah only prohibited Giluach Pei Osav Umeshayer Es Sa'ar Rosho. In other words, if he takes a total baldy haircut, he doesn't violate Pas. But the Tana of this brisa holds that even Kol Rosho is included under the lav of Hakofa. Therefore, the Torah had to tell me that this mitzvah of the Mitzorah allows him to violate the Iser of Pias Rosho, Los Hakifu, because we're holding now Hakofas Kol Rosho, Shmei Hakofa. Now the Gemara says, wait a second. Is every last Jew included in the lav of Baltakif? Well, we divide up the Jewish population into two groups, men and women. Women, as we'll soon see, are excluded from the lav of Lo Sakifu, even though it's not a mitzvah sheishas man grama, but we have a special yalfusa that exempts women. They're not included in the lav. They can cut their hair in any way they want to. And that converts the lav, or shall I say downgrades the lav of Lo Sakifu Pasot Shechem to what's called the lav she'eno shava b'kol. It's one of the few cases of a lotas in the Torah that doesn't apply to everyone. Usually a lav she'eno shava b'kol is a lav shel kahuna. Like, for example, a Kohen is not allowed to marry a grusha. That's a lav she'eno shava b'kol. But beyond the realm of, let's say, Nazir and Kohen and so forth, all the lavim, Hashav B'Kol, men and women are equal, and they're all included in the lav. But the exception is Lo Sakifu Pias Roshchem. And that lowers the level, downgrades the status and the power, so to speak, of this lav to a lav that's relatively kal, kuf lam. So that's what the Gemara now says, Ikla Mifrik, you want to derive from overriding the lav of Hakafa, that in general, all over the place, essay overrides every other essay, like the essay of Mitzorah overrides the lav. No. Mala lav de Hakafa shekain lav she'eno shava b'kol. Women are not included in this lav. This is the sugya in Kiddusha Daf Chav Tes, and so the whole sugya there on Daf Lamed Hey Amid Beis derives from psukim that women are not included in this lav. But let's say, for example, if we get to the lav of Achos Isha in the case of Yavam, We're talking about a lav sheshava bakol. Both he and she are equally included in that lav. How do we know that an essay could override a lav, even if it's a lav hashava bakol, like a chosisha? You're going to quote to me the halach of tiglachas mitzora. There you're overriding a second-class lav, so to speak, a lav she'eno shava bakol, where women are not included in the lav. Ella asyami zkono, but rather we're going to go now to what's called the second tiglachas of a nazir. This is at the very end of his tara, after he undergoes all the stages of his tara. There's an additional requirement of tiglachas, and once again, the Sanya, the Torah says, zakano, that he's not allowed to shave the, excuse me, that he's obligated to shave the hairs on his beard, on his face. Why do I need that? The Torah says, and here we're going to apply the principle of him eno inyan. Shomea ani af kohen mitzora came. We never discussed which shevet the mitzora came from. Now we're going to discuss a mitzora who's a kohen. And the Torah says, Pa'as sekonam lo yigalechu. But on the other hand, the kohen, who's a mitzora, is obligated in the mitzvah of tiglachas, of cutting off his hair. But now we have a head-on collision between the lotase and the essay. And the Brisa says, that he should be enjoined from cutting off the hairs of his beard. Under this lav, Talmud Lomer Zekano, therefore the Torah had to specify Zekano, that even in the case of the Kohen Mitzora, he should malech all his hair, even his beard hairs. And from this we can learn Esei Dochalosase. Even though, again, you'll argue that the Lotaseh Pa'as Sekono is Eno Shava Bakol. Women are not included in that Lotaseh. And therefore it's Eno Shava Bakol. But now we're going to activate the principle of him Eno Inyan. Him Eno Inyan Lelav Shena Shava Bakol. Tnei Inyan Lav Hashava Bakol. That we don't need this extra portion of Zakano, because already from Rosho we derive the principle of Esei Dochalosase She'eno Shava Bakol. Now we have another limud that teaches me the exact same thing, that Esei is Dochalosase She'eno Shava Bakol. Why is it necessary? And the answer is to teach me that Esei is Docha even Olotase Hashava Bakol. Like, for example, Achos Isha. So the Gemara says, wait a minute, Akati Itzri. I need Kano legufo, meaning in the case, even though it's a lav she'eno shava bakol, I still would have thought that Kano would not be overridden by the mitzvah of tiglachas of a mitzvah in the case of a Kohen. Salka daitachamina shani kohanim. Now keep in mind, the Isser of hashchasas pa'as Kano applies to every Jew, every male Jew. Lav dafka Kohen. However, since the Torah in Pshuto Shel Mikra, the Torah addresses the Kohen. Right? In the Parsha of Kahuna, it says, just 1 second, Lo Sakifu Pa'as Roshachem. No. In the Parsha of Kahuna, I was stuck on in Perek Yutes. Fast forward to Vayikra Chaf Aleph, and there it says Upa'as Sekonim Lo Yigalechu And the Torah there is addressing the Kohanim. Salke daitachamina shani Kohanim hoel veriba bahena kosev mitzvos yiseros. That even though the lav is formulated as a lav she'eno shava bakol, as if the Torah is addressing the Kohanim and exclusively the Kohanim, I would still say that an essay is not docha lotase. Why? Because it's a lotase of Kohanim. And Kohanim are riba bahen mitzvos yiseros. The Torah is very careful about Kedushas Kahuna. That Kedushas Kahuna will generate lavim and isurim that don't apply to other members of Klal Yisrael. So that's called riba kosuv mitzvos yiseros. So any iser that is addressed to the Kohen is more chamur because that iser is a reflection of the Torah's protection of Kedushas Kahuna, not to desecrate that Kedusha. And therefore, I would have thought, afilu lav she'eno shava bakol lo dachi. Because this lav of Zkano is formulated in addressing Kohanim, I would have thought that upgrades its severity, and an essay would not override it even if it's Eno Shava Bakol. So now, at this point, the Gemara has to find another source for essay Docha Losase. Ela Asya mi Rosho. Just 1 second, I lost the place. Ela Asya mi Rosho. In other words, leave out Skano, because Skano is written in the parasha of Kohen, and that gives it a high grade status. But let's go back to the parasha of any Jew, Vayikra Yudalit. And there, the Torah says, Zkano. I'm sorry, Rosho. Now again, we discussed Rosho on the first round, Tiglachas Rishona. Now we're talking about Rosho and Tiglachas Shnia. So the Mitzorah is purifying himself. And Rosho, in the Tiglachas Shnia, the second Hakofa, is we need a heter. Why do we need a heter? L'chorah, we have the heter from the first Tiglachas. Why did the Torah have to add another? The Sanya we learned in the Brisa, Rosho, Matamid Lomar. Why did the Torah have to repeat that a Mitzorah has to be Megalech Rosho? It says Yigalech is called Besaro. And you can't tell me that the Torah is coming to be Matir. Hakofas Pas Haroshel Mitzorah. Because even without this, we know that Tiglachas and Mitzorah doesn't have an Iser of Lo Sakivu Pas Roshchen. And therefore, Lefisha Nemar, so now the Gemara at this point is going to introduce another parsha in the Torah. And that's the parsha of Nazir. Lefisha Nemar, it says in the parsha of Nazir, Kol Yemei Neder Nizro Ta'ar Lo Yavar Al Rosho. He's not allowed to shave his head. Shomeani Af Nazir Mitzorah. What if he's both a Nazir and a Mitzorah? Is Cain, would he have the same din? Now, what would that mean? The Torah says tar lo yavar al rosha, but he happens to be a Nazir and a Mitzorah. So that this lav is going to apply even in a case of a Nazir Mitzorah. Talmud Loma Rosho. The Torah added the word Rosho to tell you that the Nazir is obligated in Tiglachas Rosho, and he's going to violate the lav of Tar Lo Yavor Al Rosho for the sake of the mitzvah of Giluach Mitzorah. So this is going to be the source in Kol HaTarakula for Esei Docha Losas. Okay, so now we're going to take a, excuse me, I just want to get a pencil here. Just to note where we got up to. Okay. Okay. All right. Now I have something interesting to share with you from the Yalkut Bi'urim. Now, some of this I understand, and some of this I don't. So I'm going to need your help. I want to focus on a Kesef Mishnah. Let me just find it. Just a second. See, the trouble is when I prepare this on Shabbos, I can't make any lines, so it's like I have to, it's such a, oh, I think I got it. Yeah. We had two parshios of Kilayim. In one parsha, the Torah spoke about Lo Yale, in the other, Lo Silbash. Lo Silbash Kilayim teaches me Levisha, the Isa Levisha of Kilayim, and Beged Kilayim Shatnis Lo Yale Alecha teaches me Ha'Allah. However, in juggling these two, you may recall that we had a hallah that was extreme, and he just, put something over his shoulder, let's say, but he wasn't wearing it in any sense. And then we had classic Levish on the other polar extreme, and putting these two psukim, juggling them together and reconciling them, we came to the conclusion that there has to be a certain similarity between hallah and levisha. For example, if let's say he dries his whole body with a large towel, and if that towel is made of tzeru pishtan, he's going to violate the isur of hallas kilayim, even though he's not wearing it as a beged, but that's called hallah. Now the question is, are these two Isurim equal? Again, they describe two different scenarios, but as far as the definition and the essence of the Isur, they are equal. And we would think they are equal. You know, you get benefit from halah, let's say you dry off your body, and you get benefit from levisha insofar as you are protected from the elements, heat or cold. However, he writes here, Midivri achronim nira she'ein adover kain. The Yesh Havdel, there's a very fundamental difference between the Isur of levisha on a beged shel kalayim and the Isur of halah in a beged shel kalayim. So this, I thought, was a very interesting topic. We touched on this in the past, but now we're getting into the Kesef Mishnah. Where did the Achronim build? From whence did they build that case that there's a fundamental difference between Ha'alah and Levisha? It's from the Rambam. There are two Rambams that have to be taken in conjunction. One Rambam is in Hilchas Kilayim, Perik Yud, Halacha Tezayin. The Rambam writes that Mochrei Ksus, those who are wearing shatnez as they present the begadim to their potential customers, is Mochrim Kedarkam. They are allowed to continue even though they're wearing kilayim. Ubilvad, says the Rambam, Shelo Yiskavnu Lehenos, they shouldn't have an intention to benefit from it. And the Rambam gives two examples. And this is all based on the Sugim Psachim that you recall we mentioned on Daf Chav Hamid Beis. And this Mishnah, the Gemara said in Psachim, that allows Mochri Ksus, Kedarkam, to wear Kilayim, is a reflection, says the Gemara, of Rabbi Shimon Shita, that David Sheinim is Kavin Mutter. So far, so good, because the Rambam in Hilchas Shabbos, at the very beginning of Hilchas Shabbos, he paskins like Reb Shimon, that David Sheinim is Kavin is Mutter. So therefore, he could be Mater Mochri Ksus. The problem is that the Rambam in Kilayim adds another piece, and he writes the following: Lo yilbash adam Kilayim afilu aroi va'afilu lignov es hameches. Meaning, let's say the tax collectors will tax you for possessions that you own; those are called assets, but not the garments that you're wearing on your body. Like I once had a case, my wife and I were in Romania, I think it was, and we were about to get on a plane to Budapest, to Hungary. It's a very short plane ride. But anyway, they weigh you, meaning they weigh your packages, and they had very strict rules. So it happened to be that because we weren't getting kosher food, we took along many cans of tuna fish, which weighs you down. So they're giving us a whole hassle. So I started taking the tuna fish out of the valise, and I started packing them in every pocket in my that I had in my pocket. I said, weigh me, you know. In any event, so the Rambam wants to know if, in order to avoid taxes, you take these garments and you put them on your body. So this is like the shirt off your back. They don't tax you for that. The Rambam says, even though it's a rod, you're only doing it for the moment to pass the tax inspection. Nevertheless, it's awesome. Now, he has no kavanah to be nene, neither from Chama nor from Tzina. When he wears these begadim, his intention is totally focused on avoiding the tax authorities. Why would the Rambam prohibit it when the Rambam himself just finished telling us that Mochri Ksus, since they don't have intention of benefiting neither during the summer or the winter from the garden, they're only transport. Therefore, it's mutter. So why does he aser lignov es ameches? Says the Kesef Mishnah. Lo hitir Ramba b'mochri ksus ela ba'allah bilvad, aval levisha asura af bi'ein miskavin la'no. So again, before we get into the lumdus of it, I just want to get the facts on the ground, get it down on the ground. The Kesef Mishnah is saying that the Rambam in Mochri Ksus is talking about ha'allah, whereas in Gneva Sameches, he's talking about Levisha. That's where I got lost. If you could help me with that. Why is Mochri Ksus ha'allah? I mean, in both cases, he's not interested in protecting himself from the elements. In both cases, he's wearing it as a beged. I came up with a theory, but it's totally wrong. So, Dok v'tishkach. I thought maybe in the case of Mochri Ksus, he's got many layers on. And that's called Derech HaLah. Whereas in the case of Gneva Samechas, he doesn't have layers. They're not going to let him get away with taxes because he's wearing, another mink coat on top of all his garden. So he's basically naked except for this beged, and that's called Derech Levisha, whereas Mochri Ksus is Derech HaLah, because he's wearing many, many layers of garments. That's what I came up with, but it's wrong, as we'll soon see. So I don't know exactly why in the Kesef Mishnah's interpretation of the Rambam, why is Mochri Ksus Halah and Gnevas Meches is Levisha. So right now, unless you have some insight, I'm going to leave that as an unanswered question. But let's just, without even understanding the Metzius, let's try to conceptualize. The Aruch LaNer says the following. Halah, which is the case of Mochri Ksus, according to Kesef Mishnah, Kol she'eno machavin lanos levisha eno ela masa bilvat. In a reality of halah, if he doesn't have any interest in benefiting from the halah, his body doesn't benefit, then he's just simply carrying it. It's not a case where, as I said before, he dries his whole body with a beged shel kalayim, but he's just folding over a beged over his shoulder. And that's how far we're going to go when we take the Kesef Mishnah's interpretation of Mochri Ksus. The Heter Mochri Ksus, says the Kesef Mishnah, the Rambam, is based on halah. Says the Aruch LaNer, he doesn't have any anah, any interest or intention of being nene from the halah. In such a case, it goes from halah to masa. It goes the other extreme that we mentioned of halah. Masha enkin levisha, but in the case where he's wearing the beged in order to circumvent the meches people, afal pisha eno miskavin lano, sof hu miskavin lilevisha. So there's no such thing as kavanas halah. It's an iser hana. The hana that you intend to get and you derive from the halah, that's what generates the iser. In levisha, it's the levisha per se, in and of itself, that generates the iser kilayim, because you lovesh it, even though you have no interest in protecting yourself from the elements, but you have kavanah for levisha. So kavanas levisha is in and of itself an independent generation, generates the iser kilayim. That's called hanas. That's called levisha, even if he has no intention to have hana from levisha. But in the case of halah, what generates or upgrades the halah from a level of masa up to levisha, it's going to be the hana that he benefits. If he doesn't have kavanah for the hana, it remains a masa. That's how halah is fundamentally different than levisha. So I emphasize this Even though, again, I'm missing a little bit of the Metzias here. I don't know exactly why Mocher Ksus is called Halah and not Levisha. That I don't know. But on a conceptual, theoretical basis, we have now two different categories of Kilayim, of the Isser Kilayim. One is Levisha. As long as he has Kavanah for Levisha, that's prohibited. And we have another category called Halah, where the Hana is what prohibits it. Ve'hosif ha'beis ha'levi. I'm not sure what he means by Hosef. I'm not sure chronologically. The Beis HaLevi and the Aruch LaNer were contemporaries. I'm not sure what he means by Hosef. I think he means conceptually. I don't think he means chronologically, historically. Anyway, he writes, Sha'isar halav isar levisha chalukim heim be'ikar yisodam. Typical Brisker terminology. Sha'isar halav hu biyisodo isar hana. V'kol she'enim v'skavin lehenos, v'chaser lo kavana, ein lo kavana li'etzem maisa isar. Masha ein kein b'levisha, halevisha yasura b'fnei atzma af below hana. So again, we now, based on this Kesef Mishnah and the way the Achronim are elaborating on the Kesef Mishnah, we can differentiate and reconcile the two Ramas. When the Ram is talking about Mocher Ksus, he's talking about Halah. And there the essence of the Isser is Hana, and he doesn't have any Kavanah for Hana, it's Mutter. Masha Enkein, the Rambam, when he's discussing Ligno Vesdas HaMoches, here he's talking about Levisha. And Levisha is on a much more severe level of an Isser Kilayim than Halah, and it's also even without Kavanah for the Hana. Now, in the next paragraph, he quotes the Mari Kurkus, who's medayik from the Lashon Haram. The Ram writes, Lo yilbash adam kilayim aroi, and he writes, aroi afilu al gabe asara begadim. So that's why I told you before that what I said was wrong, because he's talking about layers and layers, and he still considers it Levisha. I wanted to suggest that in the case of Mocher Ksus, because it's layers upon layers, that's not Levisha, that's called Halah. But that's wrong. Even though I thought it was a pretty good shot. But he says, Afilu asar begadim zel gabizeh. That's when the Rambam says that Kilayim be'aroy is also like the Mocher Ksus, like the Gneva Sameches. Shebelevisha ain't Tnai shel Halah klal, shel Hana klal. There are two words here, they sound similar. I got to be careful. There's Hana and Halah. Let's not confuse them. In regard to Levisha, Hana is not an essential part of the definition of the Isur. Umashet tzricha Hana, either Rambam says in Mocher Ksus, it all depends upon whether he has kavanah for Hana, he intends to have Hana or not. Eino ela b'Halah. In Halah, Mari Kurka says that's where Hana is essential. The afal pisha kol mekar din Hana humi levisha. K'divrei Gemara ma levisha dispe Hana afal la dispe Hana. Eina kavanah lahashvos Halah levisha. Ella sheyiter hakasu shebelevisha ba lelamed al geder iser Halah she'eno ella im Hana. So Halah requires Hana, and the essence of the iser is Hana. Now we have a Gemara in Bava Kama. The Gemara says, Lo yilbash adam kilayim afilu lavriach es hameches. Okay, that's a good source. In the Gemara Bava Kama on Daf Kuf Yud Gimel for the Rama. But the Gemara establishes that this Isur reflects the sheet of Rabbi Akiva. I'm sorry. that this Isur this Gemara and this prohibition contradicts the Shita of Rabbi Akiva. Omar Rabbi Shimon Mishmo, Rabbi Shimon says in the name of Rabbi Akiva, Mutal Lovshon, Kidei Lavriach Es Ha Meches. In other words, it would seem that the Mishnah in Bava Kama that prohibits the case of Kilayim for Lavriach Es Ha Meches, that reflects the Shita of Rabbi Yehuda, that Dover She'ena Miskavin is awesome. Rabbi Shimon, on the other hand, and he's quoting Rabbi Akiva, says that Dover She'ena Miskavin is mutter. Now, Kubdos, if we make our calculation, halacha l'maisa, based on the Gemara in Bava Kama, we should conclude, I'll explain, that Gnevas Meches is mutter. Why? Because we paskin like Rabbi Shimon, Dover She'ena Miskavin is mutter. And the Gemara is saying that the Mishnah that prohibits the Gnevas Meches reflects the Shita of Rabbi Yehuda against Rabbi Shimon. But we paskin like Rabbi Shimon. Not only that, the Rambam paskins like Rabbi Shimon. Hilchas Shabbos, Perek Aleph, I believe. Or he doesn't tell you here. The Rambam paskins like Rabbi Shimon that Dover She'ena Miskavin is mutter. We would therefore, by calculation, based on the Bava Kama, anticipate that the Rambam would matir Gnevas HaMeches, because the Isur Gnevas HaMeches, which is formulated in the Mishnah Bava Kama Kuf Yud Gimel, reflects the Shita Rabbi Yehuda. Dover She'ena Miskavin is also. The Rambam passes like Rabbi Shimon. Dover She'ena Miskavin is mutter. Hence, the Gnevas HaMeches should be mutter. So that's really a kasha on the Rambam. Okay then. So let me wish you a good day, and we'll stop here.